Hey, happy Friday. I always like Fridays. How about you? Hope it's a good one for you. Here in the midst of winter, it's Friday. Glad it's a Friday. Man, okay, enough said about Friday. Glad you're here with me today. And so come on in for just a moment and let's think together about something. Kind of stir our brains. And I never know exactly what might be the thing of the day, but sometimes putting ourselves in somebody else's shoes for a moment as best we can be not only a challenging, but a pretty revealing situation if we kind of do it honestly. The 12th chapter of John picks up on a story that you can read in the previous chapter, where it says, then 6 days before the Passover, it begins at verse 1. Then 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus, who had been dead, whom he had raised from the dead, there they made a supper, and Martha served. But Lazarus was one of those who sat at table with him. Did you ever think about that for a moment? Sitting at the table and eating dinner with a fellow that had been dead. Who would you want to talk to? Who would you want to ask questions of? Who would you want to hear from? I think I'd want to hear from Lazarus. That would be an amazing thing. And perhaps you've even wondered, what would it be like to be in Lazarus' shoes? Of course, none of us really wants to die, generally speaking. Lazarus had been dead and in the grave for 4 days. Imagine what it would be like to know that and to see the world through his eyes. And I know a lot of people have been through events where maybe their heart was stopped for a while, or they had such an injury that they were pronounced dead for a time and then were revived and brought back. And usually some have stories to tell, some don't recognize anything. But to know that you had been dead for 4 days, put in a grave, prepared and put in a grave, and there for 4 days, and been raised, and be fully aware of that, and be sitting at a dinner like this, to be sitting at a dinner like this with all these other people, imagine what that must have been like. Or go further. However many years he lived after this, we don't know how old a man he was or how young a man he was. We don't know how many years he lived after this. But every day that he lived, what a gift it must have been to have had that special notation in his life. Imagine what it would have been like to see the world and events, to see Jesus through those eyes, to have that singular perspective, an individual involved. I know there were others that were raised from the dead, but this one stands out. And those special events and that level of excitement that catches the attention and all of the hearts of those who learn it, that draw people to it in such a unique way. I think of a little girl who had been deaf from birth and never heard a sound. And then she was implanted, read about it in the newspaper, implanted with a cochlear device. And for the first time in her life, she truly picked up on what would be considered sound. Not just vibrations she could feel in her bones, but could make out different sounds in much the same way as you hear with your normal ears. And it said that when she heard those first sounds, her eyes became large with excitement and even wonder and a certain amount of fear. Think how different her life was after that moment. Or we might think about another occasion in the scriptures of a man that Jesus healed, that man that was born blind, John the 9th chapter. He'd never seen the light of day as far as we know. And then Jesus came along. And Jesus gave him sight. And for the first time in all his years, even as an adult, from his birth through childhood, through young adulthood, into his adulthood, he'd never seen the light of day. Sure, he'd felt the warmth of the sun. Sure, he'd felt with his hands and could see in that sense, that he could see and hear and use his other senses, and they worked for him in that regard. But there were limitations in his life, there's no doubt about it. And to suddenly see, and for the first time to recognize the warmth of the sun in the light that it brings, and the colors, the things that you'd never would have recognized, and the beauty that we recognize through our eyes and take for granted every day. His brain was receiving stimulus he had never known in his life. And he was alive as he had never been quite before. And though he could tell the facts to the sight and dad, but nobody could fully understand what he was dealing with. And I know we can't put ourselves fully in the shoes of a Lazarus, or maybe a little girl born deaf, or a man born blind. But there is something we can realize. In the marvelous old hymn, Amazing Grace, John Newton strove to describe the change brought to us in Jesus by two great illustrations. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. I'm not sure that we have always related well to the idea being lost and living in a society where maps cover just about everything and GPS is there and you can tell where you are at any minute, at any time, at any place, and know that being lost is generally a momentary inconvenience. Being blind, completely blind, is unknown to the majority of us. But even these we readily imagine and recognize. What a blessing it would be to see. I don't know what it would be like to be in Lazarus' shoes. I don't know what it would be like to sit at that table that day. But I know he was an intriguing character. And for a moment, I'd like for us to think about how fortunate we are. And as we consider how blessed we are, maybe the words of Amazing Grace stand out. We were totally without, and only in Christ do we have anything at all. I once was lost, no hope, but now I'm found. I was blind, I couldn't see, I didn't understand, but now I see. We're blessed in that, and what a great fortune it is for us to have that. What a great thought for a Friday. Let's go into our weekend with that kind of thought in mind, how blessed we really, really are in Christ Jesus. Thank you for being with me today. It's a great day. I hope there's a whole lot more of them down the road. I believe there will be. So thank you for being with me today, and we'll share some more down the way.